the stakes only go up, and the stakes only go up with success.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Pick Now podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Munn, and today we have a multi-time entrepreneur, Ashok Subramanian. Ashok, welcome. We'll get into your bio, but welcome to the Pick Now podcast.
Jeff, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you. Been looking forward to this. So I'm just, I'm not going to read your bio. It's on the webpage, but 3 key things, and I want to kind of track through those things. McKinsey, Liazon, Centivo. So, you're clearly a smart, analytical guy, figuring out things, trying to figure out problems to solve. I'm really curious about the transition from McKinsey to Liazon. Like, I'm always fascinated by the point in someone's story when they decide, hey, I want to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, Jeff, it's a great question. I was told when I left McKinsey as a one step before partner that I was effectively one of the more senior people to leave the firm, as we call it internally, with a completely unbaked set of next steps. So it's not a common, at least in that way, it wasn't a super common trajectory. I think it takes me back to 4 years prior to leaving McKinsey when I was out at Stanford. And I was not a born entrepreneur. I was not had a lemonade stand when I was 7 or sold records through the mail when I was 11, or whatever analogy one wants to use. I came to it rather late, and it came to me from, I think, a confluence of 2 or 3 things. The first was I was interested in trying to address to some degree social problems, and I had some time. I spent a year within McKinsey working for our not-for-profit practice. And so the idea of using market-based techniques, management techniques, as it relates to social issues was of interest to me from that part of my life. Going to Stanford, there was a lot of infrastructure around both what they called at the time public management. They've now called it the Center for Social Innovation. And of course, just the startup ethos of being in Palo Alto. And so things like, how do you start a company, and how do you form a company, and how do you get money or not get money, and how do you create a product, and had not had exposure to those things. And I found myself interested and gravitated to that. And then the third was a course I took with someone who remains a mentor to this day, Professor Joel Peterson, called Managing Growing Enterprises. And we dealt with real life scenarios. None were too big nor too small. And a lot of them had to do with how would you make decisions? How would you interact with people? How would you set culture? And I found that those were things that I happened to enjoy and not necessarily be terrible at. And so that confluence of solving problems from a how do you bring market solutions to social issues? How do you do that in a way where you get to set the terms of trade as a de novo company? And how do you potentially align those with some things that I might be pretty good at? Were things that I realized after 3 years back at McKinsey that I would not be able to do in consulting. And that was effectively the trigger event that has led me down this path.
Wow. And so from there, like when you left McKinsey, I think you said you didn't have the idea for Liazon at that point. You just left. Is that right?
That's right. I had met some people. I had some contacts. There were some nubs of thoughts, but it was ill-formed, unbaked, and candidly, the world I've lived in the last 18 years or so, which is employee benefits and the financing part of healthcare, aka health insurance or alternative health insurance. I spent not a day at McKinsey on those things.
Yeah, I
So
mean, I
it
I
really,
started out my career as a employee benefits attorney, and I did not dream when I was growing up of like, oh yeah, I really want to learn ERISA and be an
I'm sure
employee benefit.
firefighter, football player, ERISA attorney
Exactly,
were the
isn't
three
that top
choices. Yeah.
five for every kid? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny how we kind of fall into this world, and yet it's this world where it's a small enough world that there are, I'm either like know directly or am one step removed from it. It feels like almost the entire industry just because we've been in it long enough, whether it's people from Hewitt or people that, people I've coached at startups, that kind of thing. Um, yeah. So this world of benefits, how'd you get the idea? It's like, oh, I want to disrupt this.
Yeah. So to be fair, it was, I through that journey, upping and quitting, forces you to do a couple things. It forces you to go jump in the deep end of the pool,
Mm-hmm.
excuse me, and figure some things out. It forces you to meet people. It forces you to say, I don't know a lot, and why, and how should it work. And so I ended up meeting a couple folks who became co-founders,
Mm-hmm.
and those individuals had spent more time in this space than me, and they felt there was a next generation opportunity to take technology and effectively automate what had been an industry thing for 20 years prior called cafeteria plans.
Yep.
And all a cafeteria plan is basically saying, here's a block of money, and we're going to let you kind of pick and choose as the individual on a pre-tax basis how best to organize your benefits. You apply a web-based consumer interface, which was a thing, a new thing in the 2000s. And now all of a sudden, a cafeteria plan, which was a tax document that you probably wrote,
Oh yeah.
is now a benefits marketplace or a private exchange. So
Right.
Liazon became at the vanguard of what became known as private exchanges, and there was some momentum around that for a period of time, and that became the idea. But it was a byproduct of meeting folks who had a little bit more experience than me, and I brought, I think, to the table the inquisitiveness to understand if there was a problem there, if there was opportunity, and then how do you go build. And that's
Right.
how that came together.
Well, when you were talking about one of the things that you liked about the entrepreneurial path, that idea of organization building, I think in especially in the healthcare and benefits space, there's a lot of good technical ideas. There aren't a lot of people who have the wherewithal and the perspective to like build an organization around the delivery of that technical idea. And it sounds like that's what you brought.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. From a venture parlance, there are profiles of, are you a product led
Mm-hmm.
CEO? Are you, and which is often connoted with sort of an engineering first mindset and a
Right.
builder. Then
Right.
there are others who are more commercially oriented,
Uh-huh.
and there's overlap in all of this. But I think there is a third, as you said, which is, are you sort of able to preside over an institution, set the
Yeah.
culture, set the values, obviously having to make decisions on any number of things. But those are things where when you are ultimately in a consulting role, and I learned a lot from consulting, and it's helped a lot to where I've been able to get to. Ultimately, you are defined by giving people advice and hoping they implement, not
Right.
being able to own the implementation of it, the good, the bad, and everything in between, and every second order effect of that initial
Right.
set of decisions is something that you can only really do if you're in the mode of being a business builder.
Yeah. When I was at Hewitt, I did a lot of consulting back in the day too. And we used to joke about like how many Hewitt binders were on someone's, on someone's bookshelf. And I mean, we didn't really care. I mean, we cared, but we didn't really care once we had delivered the binder, whether they implemented or not. Like we gave our advice, we got paid. Let's move on to the next thing. But you're right. It's not very satisfying.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
some, right?
Yeah.
It to each their own.
Yeah.
But it became clear to me that those who advance in consulting to senior levels are built to be consultants and advisors.
Yeah.
And there's an alternative path, which is to be more of an executor.
Right.
And those paths do diverge at some point.
So was the idea for Liazon, was it the first idea you had? Did you kind of sort through some things with your co-founders? Like describe the process of like, oh yeah, we think this has got some running room.
Yeah. Um, at the risk of being philosophical, I think it depends a little bit on the definition of the word idea.
Uh-huh.
So the broad concept, the broad space
Mm-hmm.
of employee benefits have generally not changed since the social contract developed between General Motors management and the UAW in 1945.
Right.
And yet at that time, in the 62 years since, every other part of society has changed and
Mm-hmm.
technology has changed, and the nature of the employer-employee relationship from working at a company for 40 years to working at a company for then 2.5.
Right.
That thesis was at the core of, well, there's an opportunity there. There's an opportunity to personalize. There's an opportunity to take out inefficiency and cost. There's an opportunity to improve satisfaction. There's an opportunity to improve administration. So I would say the broad concept of the domain that we were going to play in never changed.
Mm-hmm.
The exact nature of what's the product, who's the target market, how was it sold, how much of it would be build versus buy versus partner. Those things were, I think, very much evolved and evolved in sort of significant ways early
Mm-hmm.
and evolved in material, though somewhat slower paced ways later on. But frankly, even post exit, some of those things
Uh-huh.
changed based on the nature of the nature of who we ended up getting acquired by.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll give you a simple example. One of the early ideas was to say there's lots of employee benefit brokers and consultants who kind of do the same thing over and over, and
Right.
they're not terribly differentiated. Maybe the answer here is to be a tech driven broker, not a
Mm.
new idea.
Mm-hmm.
And there's still companies to this day who are like, I'm going to disrupt the insurance broker world.
Yeah.
And this platform was simply a component of that. What became apparent over time was the platform had value unto itself, and having an army of third-party distributors called insurance brokers was a much more efficient and satisfying way to build, as
Right.
opposed to trying to literally disrupt
Yeah,
and
not disrupt them,
dislodge
work with them and be a solution that they can
every
offer.
single one of them. So
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
good example of a material change that was made over the course of the business.
Uh-huh.
But at its core, if you went back to the first page of a 2007 presentation and the first page of a 2014 presentation post acquisition, you would
Mm-hmm.
generally see the same story as employee benefits haven't changed in 60, 70 years. The workforce has become increasingly diverse. The workforce has become increasingly mobile. Technology has created the opportunity for personalization and unique attributes across the workforce. And let's figure out a way to get people to buy and appreciate their own individual benefit package portfolio, as opposed to whatever HR and a broker might decide in a dark room that everybody gets.
Right. Right. So as you're thinking about this thing and iterating, and I assume you're talking with, people in the market, potential buyers, potential partners, all of that. Um, how risky and scary did it feel?
Yeah, it's a great question. It didn't feel risky at the time. It did feel scary.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason it felt scary is, I don't know if you're a sports fan, Jeff, and I don't know if you're an
Sure.
analytics fan in sports, but you get to watch win probabilities, for some of
Uh-huh.
us do,
Oh yeah,
and
on the ESPN app.
on
Yeah,
ESPN,
any
and you
moment of
kind
the
of
day. Yeah.
like, are we at 50? Are we at 70?
Yeah.
Are we at 99? Are we the Baltimore Ravens that loses games even though we're at 99? Um, the the problem with a startup is your win probability is generally always below 5%
Mm-hmm.
until it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is against you. You have
Yeah.
no brand, you have no resources, you can't afford to hire good people. You have big, massive competitors who talk about how risky you are. You are putting buyers potentially at their own risk because
Right.
no one got fired for hiring UPS or IBM or what have you. So it is always extremely risky for all of those. Let me start over. It's always very scary for all of those reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And it is risky by any normal definition of risk. The reason it wasn't risky, I didn't feel at the time, was the terms of trade under which I left McKinsey. I basically
Mm.
said, I'm doing this because I don't know if I'm going to be any good at it.
Uh-huh.
This isn't about the money. This isn't about the idea of it working or not. This is about, is this something I am going to be able to do and be
Uh-huh.
good at and like it? And that was the challenge for me. I defined the scoreboard as, can I make this work? Can I prove something to myself?
Right.
And therefore, for me, it was low risk because
Right.
even if it failed, I would have learned something and
Well,
I would have gone
and
on
I'm
to the next
guessing the
thing.
door was open to go. I mean, clearly you would have had other opportunities as well, but worst case, you go back to McKinsey doing what you were doing before.
That's true.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to cover over the obstacles such as um, not taking a paycheck for a couple of
Yeah.
years
Yeah.
and having to have that conversation with your spouse and having to manage lots of other things. So it was a tough road, but existentially it was scary because it was hard. It is hard,
Uh-huh.
but it wasn't risky from that perspective because I felt like if all else failed, I had places I could go and I would have had the learning of, well, at least I tried.
Yeah. Well, and the reason I asked the question is it seems backwards, but like the more people I talk with and work with, it almost seems like the least risky and scary time is at the very beginning. And then you start to build something and have some customers and have some systems and a tech stack and investors and all of it. Um, and then it gets to the point of like, oh, now it feels like there's something to lose.
Yes. So I think everything you said is something I communicate to our team here and have before, which is effectively, it is a privilege to earn the right to let a lot of people down.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're not
And
letting
to
people
carry
down,
that on your shoulders, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, if you're not letting people down or in an opportunity to let people down, it's probably because you haven't actually gotten anywhere, which is
Mm.
a different problem.
Hmm.
My last two calls today were great partners, great clients, the types of people you want to spend time with. But it was about managing issues, situations, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So the role definitely changes, but I think that's right. And the skill set changes. And some people are really, really good at. I didn't know this was a thing going back to me not being a born founder, but there are people apparently who spend 12 to 18 months starting companies and literally hand over the keys and walk
Yeah.
away and go start something else.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd be good at that either. One, I
Uh-huh.
probably don't have the creativity to have six ideas to do serially. The second is there is part of the journey of the build and the good and the bad of it that is enjoyable and worthwhile. There's other parts of it that are very difficult. But Jeff, I think it's a well put point. The stakes only go up, and the stakes only go up with success.
Right. Right. So what was, we'll talk about Liazon and then I want to get to Centivo as well, because it's a little bit different animal, I think. But at Liazon, what was one of those first moments where it's like, oh, something's got to change. I don't know. if this is going to work, or if something doesn't happen in the next 90 days, the company's going to fold. Like, it seems like every founder has those moments where they didn't know it was going to work out and how they were going to get through it.
Yeah. Well, there were probably 50 of those moments. There were at least 3 that we were down to a day, a week of money
Wow.
to pay
Wow.
payroll.
Yeah.
Now, in a couple of those cases, we knew like we had a term sheet signed or something was going to come in. But no, it's very palpable. It's very when you're in a mode of, yeah, I am going to take 0 salary and I'm going to write a check and I'm going to write a check to get other people to write checks and that's going to pay for these other 6 people. There's something very raw in that, and we had those moments. So there are a couple parts of your question. I think the first part of the question is part of the challenge of the build phase is if you're not out there looking for reasons to say yes, then you're probably going to be stuck doing nothing. You have to engage with folks. You have to find their problems. You have to see if those are problems that are meaningful, that there's more of a market to, that are not client specific. You have to build against those problems. You have to hope that what you build is not so bespoke that's going to be thrown out before the next one. So there are things that you have to do. And I believe Paul Graham at Y Combinator has talked about this, which is early on, you need to be building for an N of 1. Like if you're not building for an N of 1, if you're hoping to build for an N of a billion, you're never going to get to 1.
Right.
But then you've got to step back and say, well, okay, is this something that I can do, or what are the pivots to go beyond that N of 1? And so I think a good example of that early on was we had a partnership and we built Liazon predominantly in Buffalo, New York, and then we grew from there. And we had a relationship with the local Chamber of Commerce, and we served lots and lots of very, very small businesses. By small, I don't mean like 100. I mean like companies that employed 2 people.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
Very, very small, and they were buying benefits program through the Chamber of Commerce. So we created an innovative partnership with the local Chamber of Commerce, actually several of them, with a local health plan, and our technology was the marketplace, and we provided the service around it. That became a complete dead end because outside of New York State and a couple of other places, there really was not any market for a Chamber of Commerce led health benefits program. On the flip side, though, what that allowed us to do was touch and feel real people, deal with service issues, deal with what people going into the product, what they liked, what they didn't like, getting to better understand people who didn't buy, like why weren't they buying? And so we used the bones of that to then go into the New York market and to go into Georgia. And we went to a couple of other places. And a lot of the learning came from that Chamber of Commerce program, even though that Chamber of Commerce program was never replicated in its exact form again. So that's a good example of, had we just said, hey, we figured out the Chamber of Commerce market,
right,
and we're going to triple down on that, we would have quickly been out of business. Right. But the fact that we did that was a good thing because it set the platform up for everything else that we wanted to do.
So it was a pilot, basically. And you learned a ton from it.
In retrospect, you could reverse engineer the logic to it was a dead end pilot. But it was not a dead end because it created the capability development that we needed to go beyond.
All right, so let's go forward a little bit. How long are you building Liazon before what was then Towers Watson approaches you, and how long did those conversations go? And did you entertain other bids, or like what was the inside scoop there?
Yeah, no, it was an odd set of circumstances. We were not for sale. We were not looking for sale to be sold. We were were going well.
Did you want to IPO? Was that what you were thinking? Or?
So interesting side detour, if you don't
Yeah,
mind.
not at all.
The last thing anyone should think about, in my opinion, is exit. Like,
Yeah.
yes, there are, so I don't even put in pitch decks exit scenarios or exit options. I
Uh-huh.
know if you were to today go into AI, but in the future, if you pulled a sample pitch deck to talk to A-list venture firms, they have like a 15 slide outline, and slide 14 of the 15 is probably, exit
Right.
scenarios. Personally, I think if you're talking to any investor worth their salt, you should not be talking about exit scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
Exit scenarios are kind of evident. They're always a handful of things.
Yeah.
And so, no, we were not thinking of IPOing. We were thinking of building a good business, growing, helping more people, helping more employers in America. And that's really, truly was the singular focus. And we were doing that. And part of that was, as I talked about earlier, we made that distribution pivot in
Mm-hmm.
the 2012 timeframe. So
Mm-hmm.
it took us about 3 years to build the product and get to sort of a basic number of clients. Um, Another detour, Jeff, if you don't mind, I think sometimes there are these stylized things, and I know the economy has changed since the 2000s, but sometimes there's this impression of, company has a cocktail napkin, raises a seed,
Right.
magically gets to 10 million in revenue, and then raises a A or a B or whatever. None of that's just real.
Uh-huh.
Maybe it is for 1% of companies, but we took 2 years to get the first million in revenue. We
Mm-hmm.
took 4 years to get to 4 million in revenue. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when we raised our first material venture round. It was a
Uh-huh.
$12.7 million raise led by Bain Capital Ventures in April of 2011. We had done some smaller raises to that point. But I say all that because you're not thinking IPO. You're thinking about trying
Yeah.
to sell a customer, serve them, and not run out of money. And
Right.
and so in that 2011 timeframe, we raised some money, we grew a direct sales force, and it became apparent that the direct sales force were good people. We didn't make hiring mistakes, but
Mm-hmm.
those people were not able to sell as well as founders.
Mm.
And they were not able to dislodge brokers as well as founders.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And that's what led us down the path of, well, wait a second, why don't we think of an alternative approach here as it relates to how we distribute our product? And that pivot was in 2012 into
Mm-hmm.
2013, and we started to see amazing results. So we
Mm.
were all guns a-blazing on grow distribution and get this product in more people's hands, and everything was going really well. And completely out of the blue, in September or late August of 2013, I get an email from somebody I had met once. And it was, these were people who were at a company that was doing somewhat similar things to us,
Mm-hmm.
but in the retiree space, called
Mm-hmm.
Extend Health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I
And,
remember them.
and those guys said, hey, we were, as you know, we got acquired by Towers in
Mm-hmm.
18 months earlier. And they're interested in the kinds of things you guys are doing in the active space, and we'd like to come talk to you. So I said, great.
Uh-huh.
Summer holidays and everything. That meeting didn't happen until the third week of September.
Uh-huh.
Our deal was closed on November 22nd.
Wow.
So no sale process, no banker, none of that. We didn't even have a CFO
How did you know it was a decent deal? Like, did you?
So basically, what ended up happening was, we had this meeting in the third week of September, and I thought a person or two were going to show up at our office, and about 14 of them showed up, and we had a good conversation. And co-founder and I looked at each other and said, "Yeah, they didn't bring 14 people here for nothing."
Right.
Got a call back about 10 days later from someone, their head of corp dev, who, kind of became a friend through the process. And he was like, look, I don't want to mess around. We don't want to, we don't want to partner. We don't want to like do a pilot. Like we get you guys, we get what you do. there's some diligence around like, does the code actually work and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. But
Mm-hmm.
we want to buy the company. Let us know
Yeah.
if you're interested or not. So I had a board conversation, and the board was basically of the mind that we were not for sale, but that if there was a price and other conditions that would basically be the equivalent of if we were to build for another couple years and get to 90% of what we would hope to, if at
Yeah.
that point there were an exit, and if it were in a similar zip code
Mm-hmm.
financially, that we would entertain it. So I kind of went back to them with guidance
Yeah.
in that direction,
Yeah.
and they came back with a first offer. The final offer ended up being in the 20% range over their initial offer. So they moved
Mm-hmm.
fairly substantially, but the first offer put them in a range that we sort of felt like they were serious. Like, you kind of,
Yeah.
if they had one less digit on the offer or whatever, then we'd be like, yeah, look, you guys, I get it. You're probably fairly valuing us for where we are today, but we're looking to be
Right.
valued in a couple years. They came out right out of the gate and put a number out that was in the range of not only what a um, good financial offer would have been with a couple of years of progress, but also in the range of what a venture exit would have been. And I
Mm-hmm.
think those sorts of things were pretty strong signals that we were at least in the right zip code.
Yeah. So at least the mental landscape of where you are changes pretty dramatically in the span of like a few weeks. What was that
That,
like?
yeah, that's right. It was wild. I sort of vaguely remember um, kind of coming home one day and saying, "Hey, we had a meeting with these people, and I don't know, they might want to be a partner, they might want to buy the company." And then 2 weeks later, kind of saying, "Hey, we have an offer to potentially buy the company." To 2 weeks after that, having a signed, letter of agreement, and really then going into some of the diligence. But all
Mhm.
of the diligence, like tech diligence, legal diligence, accounting, like all that happened concurrently, because they wanted to close as fast as humanly possible in an effort to capture their next sales cycle. The
Gotcha.
benefit sales cycle as well
Oh
as
yeah.
anyone, Jeff. And
Yeah.
from their perspective, it was, we need to get this deal done this year soon so we can try to hit the sell cycle of larger companies that make their decisions for the following year by the 1st of June.
Right. Right.
Now, the reality is, and we'll get into some of that, the urgency probably was over calculated on their part, because once you
Mhm.
join a mothership, things just start to move slower.
I was going to ask
But
about
but
that.
that was the rationale. That was the
Yeah.
rationale for the speed. And I would say,
Mhm.
from an exit perspective, the speed was helpful to us. Um, One of the things I'll share, that the lens through which they basically viewed the acquisition was, I get they have revenue. We're glad they have revenue. We don't care about their revenue.
Mhm.
Like, we care entirely about, is the capability that they have real? Does it work? And can it scale to serve the millions of people that we intend to put on it with our own
Exactly.
distribution?
We sell it to all our clients. Yeah.
You got it.
Absolutely.
So
Mhm.
that was a good place to be, because that was a very
Yeah.
diligenceable issue.
Right.
We felt good about the fact that they would get good remarks on that.
Mhm.
And, oh, by the way, it de-risked, obviously, all the other things that people might care about in a more traditional process.
So the actual deal is signed September or October of 13, is that right?
Call it mid-October of 13. It was signed, not meaning a letter of exclusivity
Yeah.
was signed in mid-October. The deal closed roughly November 22nd.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
when it was announced to the world, and our own employees and so on.
And so you go from being co-founder to this standalone thing where you get to make all the decisions to part of the mothership, as you described. What was that like?
Um, it was it was mixed, but generally positive. I think
Mhm.
there's a subculture of founders being thankful for these things, but then poo-pooing everything about the organization that they join. And I think that's unfair in general. It's a little
Yeah.
disingenuous in general. I also think in our case, there were some real pros and cons to what I'm about to describe, but it was a net positive. You know Towers Watson. It's a
Mhm.
professional services firm, and it's frankly as good as it gets in the
Yeah.
industry. High
Yeah.
quality people, high values, high integrity. In a
Mhm.
lot of ways, I felt good about it because it reminded me of McKinsey in the people
Yeah. Yeah.
world.
Different industry, but I could see the similarities. Sure. Yeah.
So great meetings with leadership. Obviously got to meet CEO, got to meet the head of Americas, who became a friend, a mentor, my boss at Towers, and is now chairman of the board at Centivo. So a lot of really good connections. But the people side always
Mhm.
felt good. Number one.
Mhm.
Number two, we were part of a multi-acquisition strategy, unbeknownst to me, but preceded by Extend Health. And then after that, they did at least two or three more deals, which was all part of a how do we get beyond a billable hour business? How do we get to a
Yeah.
business where we can sell products and SaaS type revenue streams? And so we were sort of viewed as hey, these are the cool kids who are part of where we want to go. Nothing
Right.
wrong with the
Right.
past, but it's part of where we want to go. So all those things were very positive. I would say the two biggest challenges that were dealt with in as constructive a way as possible, but were culture clashes and more than just culture. So the first was when they bought us knowingly, we were still a high growth, cash burning enterprise.
Mhm.
They were a non cash burning enterprise, high profit enterprise. By the way, that was part of the M&A thesis. Like
Mhm.
our NOI will go down by 30 basis points or whatever the number was. Oh, by
Yeah.
the way, the flip side of that is we are picking up this capability and it's a better way for us to do this than trying to build it on our own and likely
Mhm.
not succeeding. Oh, by the way, when you get into an organization where everyone's incentives are completely aligned on the old model,
Right.
such as profit, it becomes hard for people to tolerate. Well, why are these people getting software developers? Why are these people getting engineering
Mhm.
resources and so on? So that was one part of the challenge to your initial question. The other part of the challenge was something I ended up saying to my leader, when I said, "Hey, I'm going to take a long time to transition, but oh, by the way, or a few months to transition, but oh, by the way, like I'm going to be transitioning,"
Yeah.
was as part of that change that you described, I was told, hey, you get to run everything you're running. You're going to run your business unit, but HR and finance are now going to be part of central HR and finance because that's how we do
Mhm.
things.
Mhm.
And I said, I get it. I understand. I can't be the exception, but just for what it's worth, from where I come from, if you don't control people and you don't control money, you don't control anything.
Mm.
And so that was a pretty big shock to the system in terms of how do you work as a SBU inside a corporate infrastructure where things like finance and HR are controlled outside.
Does that mean that when you were like doing reviews and like giving people raises that you had to fit within the same matrix that the broader organization? Oh yeah.
It 100%.
Yeah. So that's a huge alignment issue.
It's a huge alignment issue. Now, the flip side, it was a known issue, and
Yeah.
I was part of a task force of um, led by the head of strategy, who is basically like, we can't have these businesses be in the same rules as the professional services business, and
Uh-huh.
so we need to come up with new approaches. And I was part of a group of 3 or 4 or 5 people that was trying to work through that. Well,
Right.
ultimately, what happened was nothing changed,
Mm.
and that person actually ended up leaving as well, because it's hard. It's hard to
Yeah.
change big institutions.
Yeah.
So, but that is exactly it. It's hard to have alignment when you don't control the means of production or the financials.
Wow. Okay. So when you left McKinsey, you took a break and then, eventually Liazon is born. When you left Towers
Yeah.
Watson,
There wasn't a
was it
break.
direct? There was a break. It
There,
wasn't directly to start Centivo.
yeah, so there was no break. Post McKinsey, there was no break. There was a go out, jobless,
But I
but
mean, you
go.
didn't know what you were going to start
Correct.
when you left.
Correct.
That's my point. And did
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know you were going to go start Centivo when you left Towers Watson?
No.
Uh-huh.
I felt like I had one more in me,
Uh-huh.
which
Yeah. So how old were you at the time?
so 31 when we started Liazon, 37 at exit,
Yeah.
and plus
I
or
would hope
minus
you'd have
38.
one or
Yeah.
more in you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had one more in me. So I took about, if I remember the timeline, I ended up taking about 6 months in a slow transition. So I was at
Mhm.
Towers, I was available, but I was not working at the same level, and people knew I was moving on. And
Yeah.
then I took about another year and did the things that people do. I spent a lot of
Hmm.
time at playgrounds. I had a 6 and a 2-year-old at the time.
Yeah.
I did school drop-offs. I kept in touch with some people in the industry and had conversations with them from time to time. I kept in touch with old investors who were kind enough to say, if people get lucky once, we tend to back because they tend to get lucky more than once.
Uh-huh.
So, kept in touch with them and all that. But yeah, I think the timing of it and the how and the what were a little more incoherent, but that I would sort of jump back and do something else, and it wouldn't be it would be a startup-ish thing. It wouldn't be going to a big company or what have you. I wasn't going to go work at United Healthcare like that. That was
Yeah.
I was fairly
Yeah. I
clear
mean,
on that.
I love your point, and I agree with that. That culture of like the founder who sells to the big company and then bashes the big company, and it's not like there's anything wrong with the big company. It's just not a fit for like the person who's been an entrepreneur and a founder.
And startups are terrible fits for people who thrive in large companies
Absolutely.
for lots of reasons. So no,
Yeah.
that's exactly right. So I think there should be more of a normalization, and there's this notion of an intrapreneur who tends to
Hmm.
build new things inside of bigger companies. Like, I'm not sure how successful those are. I do think there's a real profile for someone who's able to operate a business inside a big company post acquisition,
Uh-huh.
and that is a discrete lane, if you will, in terms
Yeah.
of skill set. Biggest one is you don't have to raise capital, and that
Right.
is, by the way,
Well, you have to
amazing.
raise capital internally, which is its own skill set.
Correct. No, that's
Yeah.
well put. So managing a corporate finance function versus managing the financial markets outside is a very different,
Hmm.
capability set, skill set, has a different patience metric, et cetera. So I
Yeah.
do think there is a skill set for that. But yeah, no, I was fortunate to have relationships. I was fortunate to have some industry knowledge. I was fortunate to have some credibility, and for better or for worse, the healthcare problems hadn't gone away. If anything, they had gotten worse.
Right.
And I think the thing that drew me to one more thing here was that in the period of 2007 to 2017, if anything, high deductible plans had become more of a thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I was troubled by the impact of high deductible plans becoming a thing for the typical American family. And I was somewhat troubled, candidly, by the role that Liazon in our marketplace model had in that,
Mm.
because one of
Mm.
the things that we did was create liquidity of choice.
Right.
And a lot of people, given more transparency into available options and price point transparency, were opting for plans that cost less and covered less.
Uh-huh.
And that was leading to things like people not seeing doctors or people not
Right.
engaging the healthcare system unless
All
they
of
were
these
going to an emergency room.
foreseeable but unintended consequences, right?
You got it.
Of like, yeah, when I wait, I have to pay how much to go see the doctor now? Yeah, I think I'll wait a few days and see what happens.
Hope it
Yeah,
goes away.
right, right. So one of the things that I think is, I don't know that it's unique in your story, but it's just really showing up for me right now, and I want to call it out, is your ability to actually step away for some period of time. So you stepped away from McKinsey, you stepped away from Liazon, Towers Watson. Um, how was that for you? Because a lot of people, like, they're going 100 miles an hour all the time up here, and the idea of slowing down and going to the playground with their kids, and like they say they want to do it, but then while they're doing it, they're doing something else. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
were you able to actually take a break, and what were the benefits of that?
Yeah. So I think a few things. I think the first is I was. The second is I go back to too many people identify themselves, their own self-worth, their own ability to self-describe who they are and what they do by virtue of where they work. It's a very
Mm-hmm.
American thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not unique to startups or big companies or anything. But um, one of the things that was interesting to me, having left McKinsey and to join a nothing burger that didn't exist and had no meaning to anybody, was you have to redefine your own sense of self-worth, and it can't be because of where you went to school or where you work.
Right.
And it has to be for the meaning of what you're doing. And that meaning of what you're doing applies whether it's a professional context or a personal context. So I was in no rush to get back. I did start to have some of those hamsters in the brain moving as you were signaling, because of this notion of I'm aware, I know the healthcare system, I know there's big differences in price, I know that people can't afford their coverage, I know there's a way to do that in a way that's a win-win-win. So I was definitely having all of those, but not jumping to something else. I was good. Like I
Mm-hmm.
was very, very good on doing all of that. I think the other part of it was it. I think having that period of time of spending time with the little kids and me close to home and so on, it's helped me to this day where I'm pretty involved. Like it wasn't sometimes there's this, hey, I'm glad I took those couple years because I've now spent the 10 since like not seeing anybody.
Right.
Well, that's not
And they
how I
still
roll.
remember me. Yeah.
Right. This is very different. I
Yeah.
architect my schedule and my life around being around. And maybe there's a professional cost to it, maybe not. I don't know. Others can judge that. But I'm managing all kinds of things on the basis of I was around those years and I'm around now and I'll still be around until I'm needed to be around. And I think it just creates a new constraint for how you operate your life, as opposed to saying that's something that I have to trade off against. It's like, no, I'm not going to trade off against that. And
Yeah.
if there's other things I have to trade off against, then so be it.
Where do you think this mentality comes from? That it's a combination of like work as identity, but also like, if I do not maximize my output, there's something wrong with me.
Yeah, that's a deep question that's probably better answered by others. But I would say this. Um, the two answers that come to mind are: one, it goes back to the origin story of why I got into this space and what I shared with respect to the time at Stanford. I wanted to use market-based problem-solving approaches to solve problems of importance, at least as defined by me. And
Yeah.
so the exit, the financial part of that's always important and helpful, but it's not the end. It's the
Mhm.
the journey itself is the end. And has there been a difference in the problem that we were trying to solve? Like, those are the ends in and of to themselves. And if there's a financial reward, it's clearly helpful, right? There's no doubt
Right.
about that. I think the second is I've sort of, over the years basically said, if I had many more resources than I had today, like, what's the one thing I'd want to do with them? And look, I'd love to buy the Buffalo Bills. But I think that's been priced out at this point.
Yeah.
So the reality is there's no life-changing sort of financial event on the horizon. So let's reground on what's important. And regrounding on what's important isn't going to be the incremental hour or two or three, away from kids, away from family, away from doing things that are most important. Now, oh, by the way, you can still make sure you get the most out of the 8-10 hours or whatever that you devote, by being, more maniacal about how that time is spent. And I think, I think that does come with time, right? That does come with time and maturity. And, when I was early at Liazon, I was absolutely up until midnight wordsmithing every bullet on page 13 of a PowerPoint. And that's just not that important. But you're not going to know until you go through that chapter of the journey that wasn't really that important.
So, two very different organizations, different business models, different, many different things. And I think Centivo has a much larger footprint as well. Yeah. What have you learned from your experience at Liazon and how has it impacted you in terms of how you show up personally, how you show up as a leader, and the kind of organization and culture you're building at Centivo?
Yeah. So I think, the good news about doing a startup the second time is there are plenty of mistakes the first time around that you are likely not to repeat. The bad news is that there's a whole set of new mistakes out there to be made. So these are hard things. And I think the biggest mistake people do make is assuming that things don't change. Markets shift, people shift, employee value proposition shifts, COVID happens, remote work becomes a thing. And there are a lot of playbook. There are a lot of plays in the playbook that either need to be thrown out or rewritten, because of those shifts that are just hard to anticipate in advance. Again, I think what doesn't change is how do you step back and be maniacally focused, obsessive even, on a couple of core principles. So can you be obsessive on what is the core problem you're trying to solve and how is that differentiated relative to the market? So for us, I use a vanity metric of we want to be the most affordable health plan in America without compromising on quality. Our vanity metric on that is what percentage of our people on our plan spend less than $100 a year out of pocket on all their healthcare.
Wow.
And that number is 65%.
Wow.
So part one is set the problem, set the target, be obsessive about reaching that. Part two is how can you do that in a way without compromising on things like customer experience? And that's a work in progress. Like, there's some things that we do very well. There's some things that we have to do better. But I go back to the difference between the companies is vast. But the commonality is trying to maintain that level of focus on the most important things, which is core value prop and customer experience.
Do you feel like it is higher risk than Liazon was?
It's higher stakes.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah. So I don't want to. I'm not trying to wordsmith your question on the word risk.
Yeah.
But it is higher stakes because I think, rightly or wrongly, there's a mystique that surrounds the category of health insurance. It is this combination of a technical purchase because of the cost and the provider access side of it.
Yeah.
An emotional purchase because it is a product that people use in their greatest time of need.
Yeah.
It is something that affects everybody. It is not
Mhm.
workers' comp that sits, or general liability, or things that sit way behind the scenes. It is
Mhm.
visible to the rank and file. And it's also visible in some ways, not in a positive way, to the decision makers, the executive group of a company.
Right.
And so there's quite the needle to thread on being able to come to market with a viable alternative health plan. And the definition of viable is in the eyes of the beholder, but it has
Mhm.
to save enough money to make it worth the while for someone to implement. It has to either not detract or advance quality as it relates to healthcare outcomes. It has to be implementable in a way that fits into the apparatus of a company, small or large. And it has to create a level of noise which is within the tolerance of an employer HR suite.
Right.
Um, and those are all independently hard objectives to actually meet. To do all
Well,
four of them at
and it has to be
once,
new but proven. And I mean, yeah, we
I haven't
right?
even gone down that path, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Are you old hat? Are you new hat? Are you this and that and the other? So
Yeah.
one of the lines I often use is our member experience is as good as the person at the front desk of a provider partner of ours
Mhm.
who, when the person shows up and shows their digital or physical ID card, the first reaction can't be, I've never heard of this. Is this real insurance?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And so that, to me, is as good an example of, we can control our member experience in lots and lots of ways, but we can't control all of it.
Right.
And that is both the problem and the opportunity that we have in trying to reinvent a category like ours. So that was a
Mhm.
long answer, Jeff, but I think it is much, much, much higher stakes than Liazon. Liazon was, at the end of the day, a technology company with a thin service layer. We
Yeah.
are a service company in that we are a health plan, an alternative health plan, but we are tech forward in how we do things.
Right. Well, and it just takes a lot more capital to create what you're trying to create there too.
More capital, more people, more of an investment in a certain type of person, some of whom you know, who
Mhm.
might be described as being well ahead of what's actually needed at any given time, but is the kind of thing that you need to do to build that level of credibility to get through the new but proven gauntlet that you described.
Yeah. So you've got this thing that is much larger stakes, to use your word. Do you personally feel like what's your stress level now compared with what it used to be?
Um, I'm pausing to prove to the audience that these questions were not scripted in advance. It's a
No,
really
they certainly
thoughtful.
weren't.
Yeah, it's a thoughtful question. It is a very different type of stress.
Mhm.
It is stressful. The more versus less is hard for me to answer,
Yeah.
but here's where it's different. The personal stakes are much lower.
Mhm.
Um, but the stakes of delivering not only for our clients, our members, patients. We purchased a company that has gotten us into the business of delivering care through virtual primary care. The stakes for them is much, much higher.
Yeah.
I personally communicate with members. It's something that I don't know if every CEO does or would do or whatever. But I send emails, I get responses, I read survey results, I reach out to folks, like all of that. And,
Mhm.
when I hear someone say something that is their lived experience, but so far off our intent, like that takes it,
Right.
I take that very personally. And
Yeah.
so in that regard, the stakes are higher because that person's lived experience contextualizes how important the product that we deliver is for them or needs to be for them. I just don't think a benefits platform by which you're electing your choices on an annual basis is within the same, within a country mile of those same stakes. But I think when you say risk, you may not have meant it this way, but like if the company were to succeed financially or not succeed financially, it isn't going to make a difference in my life. And
Right.
so to me, it is high stakes for all of the people that are in our ecosystem. But I don't personally, and therefore it contributes to stress, but it's not I don't view it as a risky proposition.
Right. Well, what I'm hearing, and I think this is a normal trajectory for a lot of folks, as you have some level of success in your career, and you get further along, it becomes less about just the financials, because you figure out, oh, the financials can only do so much, and short of buying the Buffalo Bills, maybe I'm good, right? And more about like meaning and purpose and impact, and that's what you're talking about. That's what feels high stakes. It's like I have a chance to make a difference with this company, and that's really important to me, and it has an impact on a lot of people, and I really want to capitalize on that.
I think you said what I was trying to get at in 75% fewer words. So well done.
Well, that may be a good place to wrap up this conversation, Ashok. Thank you for being willing to share and go deep. Any last thoughts that you have? For people who are interested in keeping track of what's up with Centivo, or setting up a meeting with your team, like how do folks reach out to you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is pretty easy. So
Hmm.
reach out to me, reach out to Centivo through LinkedIn is probably, my recommendation. And Jeff, just thanks to you. It's an interesting, I probably won't do justice to the way you would describe it, but your intersection of leadership, values, personal development, and employee benefits as a category is a relatively fascinating one. So appreciate the spotlight that you're putting on it through this and other things that you
Oh,
do.
thank you. Thank you. Well, Ashok, let's call it here. That's another episode of the Pick Now podcast. Thank you, Ashok, for being our guest today, and we'll see everybody next time. Take care.